Your shoulders just tensed. Not because you heard something, not because you saw movement, but because somewhere in the back of your skull, beneath conscious thought, something whispered, "You are not alone." Maybe you're in a room you know is empty. Maybe you just checked. Maybe you even laughed at yourself for checking. But the feeling didn't leave. That prickle at the base of your neck. That subtle awareness spreading across your skin like invisible fingers. Your eyes dart to doorways. Your breathing shallows. And for reasons you cannot articulate, you are certain someone is watching. This is not paranoia. This is your nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do. And what most people never realize is that the feeling of being watched isn't about what's actually there. It's about what your brain has learned to expect. Here's the truth that psychology rarely admits out loud. Your mind doesn't wait for proof before it decides you're in danger. It decides first. Then it finds reasons later. The sensation of being watched is one of the oldest survival mechanisms in the human brain. Long before language, long before logic, long before you had words for fear, your ancestors survived because they could sense predators without seeing them. Eyes in the dark. Movement in peripheral vision. The feeling that something was tracking them even when nothing appeared. That system never left. It just went underground. And now it fires in rooms where no threat exists. In parking lots at dusk. In empty hallways. In your own home at 3 a.m. when every rational part of you knows you are alone. But the amygdala doesn't care about rational. It cares about fast. And fast means assuming the worst before the prefrontal cortex can finish its sentence. So when you feel watched, what's actually happening is this. Your brain is processing environmental cues faster than your conscious mind can track. A shadow that moved wrong. A sound that didn't quite fit. A silence that feels too heavy. Your nervous system registers these discrepancies in milliseconds and translates them into one clear directive: the alert. That's why the feeling is so visceral. It bypasses thought entirely. Your body responds before your mind even asks the question. Muscles tighten. Heart rate climbs. Pupils dilate. You become hyper-focused without choosing to be. And here's where it gets strange. Studies on gaze detection show that humans are remarkably good at sensing when someone is looking at them, even when they can't see the person directly. The brain has specialized circuits dedicated to detecting eyes, faces, and attention. These circuits are so sensitive that they activate even when the stimulus is ambiguous, which means your brain will interpret vague shapes as faces. It will see eyes in shadows. It will find patterns that suggest surveillance even when none exists. This is called pareidolia, the tendency to perceive meaningful images in random data. But it's not random. It's strategic. Your ancestors who saw predators in every shadow survived more often than those who waited for certainty. So evolution built a brain that errs on the side of caution. Better to feel watched when you're alone than to miss the one time you're not. But modern life has created a problem. Because now, that ancient alarm system fires constantly. In environments that are statistically safe but emotionally triggering. Cameras everywhere. Strangers on phones. The vague awareness that someone, somewhere, might be tracking your data, your location, your behavior. The feeling of being watched has become ambient, persistent, and your nervous system cannot tell the difference between a predator in the bushes and the quiet unease of living in a surveillance culture. So the sensation lingers, not as panic, not as terror, but as low-grade vigilance that never fully shuts off. People who feel watched often describe the same physical markers. A tightness between the shoulder blades. A sudden urge to turn around. The sense that the space behind them is charged with something they cannot name. These are not imagined. They are the body's way of saying, check your six. And here's the deeper layer. The feeling of being watched is not just about external threats. Sometimes, it's about internal ones. When someone grows up in environments where they were constantly monitored, criticized, or judged, their brain learns to internalize that gaze. Even when alone, they feel observed. Not by a person, by an invisible audience that never stops evaluating. Psychologists call this the internalized other, the voice that narrates your actions, the presence that judges your thoughts. It's the residue of early relationships where love felt conditional, where approval required performance, where privacy was a privilege, not a right. For these individuals, the feeling of being watched is not paranoia. It's memory, the brain replaying old patterns in new environments. And because those patterns formed when the person was young, they feel true even when they're not. This is why some people cannot relax even in their own homes, why they check locks multiple times, why they feel exposed even behind closed doors. The sensation of being watched has become wired into their baseline state. But there's another dimension to this, one that most people overlook. The feeling of being watched can also be a signal of disconnection from yourself. When you spend too long ignoring your own needs, suppressing your own feelings, overriding your own instincts, a strange thing happens. You start to feel like a stranger to yourself. And that strangeness manifests as the sensation of being observed. It's as if part of you has stepped outside and is watching from a distance. Not with kindness, not with curiosity, but with cold assessment, judging whether you are doing enough, being enough, performing enough. This dissociation creates a psychological split. You become both the observer and the observed. And the observer is never satisfied. People who experience this often describe feeling watched even when they know they are alone, because they are being watched by the part of themselves they can no longer fully inhabit. This is the cost of self-abandonment. The nervous system, unable to trust the person it's housed in, turns surveillance inward. It monitors, it evaluates, it never rests, because rest would mean trusting yourself. And trust was forfeited long ago. So what does the brain do when it feels watched? It scans, constantly, looking for the source, looking for the threat, looking for confirmation that the feeling is justified. But here's the trap. The more you scan, the more your brain finds evidence. Because once the amygdala is activated, it interprets neutral information as suspicious. A glance from a stranger becomes prolonged eye contact. A car parked nearby becomes surveillance. A coincidence becomes a pattern. This is called confirmatory bias. The brain seeks data that supports its initial assumption. And when the assumption is "I am being watched," every ambiguous detail becomes proof. The result is a feedback loop. The feeling of being watched triggers scanning. Scanning finds evidence. Evidence reinforces the feeling. And the cycle tightens. Breaking this loop requires something counterintuitive. Not more vigilance, not more checking, but less. Because the feeling of being watched thrives on attention. The more you feed it, the stronger it grows. Yet telling someone to just relax misses the point entirely. Because the nervous system is not responding to logic. It's responding to threat detection that happens below conscious awareness. So the solution is not to dismiss the feeling. It's to update the system. And that begins with understanding what the feeling is actually signaling. Most of the time, it's not about an external observer. It's about internal dysregulation. The nervous system is overstimulated, underrested, or stuck in a pattern it learned long ago. When the body feels unsafe in general, it will find specific reasons to justify that feeling. And being watched is one of the most common. This is why the sensation often appears during moments of stillness, late at night, during quiet afternoons, in spaces where there are no distractions. Because when the external world goes quiet, the internal alarm system gets louder. The brain, no longer occupied with tasks, turns its attention inward. And what it finds is unprocessed vigilance. Old fears that were never fully released. Tension that was never fully discharged. So it projects that tension outward, into the environment, into the feeling of being observed. And suddenly, the empty room doesn't feel empty anymore. But here's what most people don't realize. That feeling, uncomfortable as it is not trying to harm you. It's trying to protect you, in its own dysfunctional way. The sensation of being watched is the nervous system's attempt to keep you alert in a world it perceives as unpredictable. It's doing what it was trained to do. Scan for danger. Prepare for threat. Never let your guard down. The problem is not the mechanism. The problem is that the mechanism is running on outdated information. Your brain is still reacting to environments that no longer exist, to relationships that ended, to dangers that passed. But because those experiences were never fully processed, they continue to shape perception. This is where healing begins. Not by forcing the feeling away, not by rationalizing it into submission, but by acknowledging what it's trying to tell you. The feeling of being watched is often a messenger, and the message is simple. Something inside you does not feel safe. Maybe it's the pace of your life. Maybe it's a relationship that demands too much. Maybe it's the way you've learned to override your own boundaries until you don't know where you end and others begin. When the nervous system feels perpetually invaded, it cannot distinguish between external observation and internal pressure. Both feel the same. Both activate the same alarm. So the solution is not just about calming the feeling. It's about addressing the source. And the source, more often than not, is a lack of internal safety. The sense that even when you are alone, you are not truly free. That even when no one is watching, you are still performing. This is the invisible exhaustion of living under constant evaluation, whether that evaluation comes from others or from yourself. People who grew up with hypercritical caregivers often carry that criticism into adulthood. They internalize the gaze. And now, even in solitude, they feel scrutinized. Their thoughts are monitored. Their actions are judged. Their worth is always under review. The feeling of being watched, in this case, is not about paranoia. It's about a psychological habit that was formed early and never questioned. But here's the shift that changes everything. When you realize that the observer in your mind is not real, that it's a construct built from old voices, old fears, old rules, you can begin to dismantle it. Not overnight, not easily, but gradually, by recognizing when the internal critic is speaking, by noticing when you are performing for an audience that doesn't exist, by asking yourself, in moments of quiet vigilance, who am I afraid is watching me right now? Often, the answer is no one. And that realization, simple as it sounds, begins to loosen the grip. Because the feeling of being watched is sustained by belief. The belief that someone is there. The belief that their judgment matters. The belief that you must remain alert. But what if you didn't have to be? What if the room really is empty? What if the silence really is just silence? What if the shadows are just shadows, and the feeling is just a feeling? This is not about denying your experience. It's about separating sensation from certainty. The feeling of being watched is real. The presence of an actual observer is not. And understanding that difference is what allows the nervous system to begin recalibrating. So what can be done? How does someone living with this persistent sensation begin to shift it? The first step is recognition. Not dismissal. Not minimization. But honest acknowledgement. The feeling is real, even if the threat is not. The second step is grounding. When the sensation arises, bring attention to the body. Not to scan for danger, but to anchor in the present. Feel your feet on the floor. Notice your breath. Name 5 things you can see. This interrupts the loop between perception and panic. The third step is pattern recognition. Notice when the feeling appears. Is it during stillness? During stress? After certain interactions? Patterns reveal triggers. And triggers, once identified, can be addressed. The fourth step is self-compassion. The feeling of being watched is not a flaw. It's a response. A response shaped by experience, by biology, by environment. Shaming yourself for it only deepens the dysregulation. The fifth step is reclaiming solitude. Not as something to endure, but as something to inhabit. Practice being alone without distraction, without performance, without the internal audience. This is difficult at first. The urge to fill the silence will be strong. The discomfort of your own presence will surface. But over time, the nervous system learns that solitude is not danger. That being alone does not mean being watched. And slowly, the feeling begins to soften. Not because it was defeated, but because it was understood. the sensation of being watched is a remnant, a psychological artifact from a time when vigilance meant survival. It served a purpose once, but now, in most cases, it's a signal that the system is stuck. Stuck in old patterns, stuck in old fears, stuck in the belief that safety requires constant monitoring. But safety does not come from vigilance. It comes from regulation, from the ability to be present without defense, from the capacity to exist without justification. And that capacity is built slowly, through moments of stillness that don't trigger alarm, through experiences of solitude that feel neutral, then peaceful, then restorative. This is the work, not to erase the feeling, but to change the relationship with it, to recognize it as a visitor, not a truth, a sensation, not a certainty, a signal from a nervous system that has been on high alert for too long. And when you begin to treat it that way, something shifts. The feeling doesn't control you, it informs you. And information, unlike fear, can be worked with. The brain that learned to feel watched can also learn to feel safe. Not through force, not through denial, but through patient, consistent reassurance that the threat it's preparing for is no longer here. That the room is empty. That the silence is kind. That being alone is not the same as being exposed. This is the paradox. The feeling of being watched is both ancient and immediate, both protective and exhausting, both real and imagined. But it is not permanent. It is not identity. It is a pattern. And patterns, once understood, can be rewritten. So if you feel watched, even now, know this: your nervous system is not broken. It is doing what it was taught to do. And with time, with awareness, with compassion, it can learn something new. It can learn that stillness is not danger, that solitude is not exile, that the absence of eyes does not mean the absence of safety. And when that lesson finally sinks in, the feeling that someone is always watching begins to fade. Not because you forced it away, but because you stopped needing it. Because the observer you feared was never really there. It was only ever a shadow, a projection, a ghost. And ghosts, once recognized, lose their power. You are not being watched. You are simply learning to be alone with yourself again. And that, uncomfortable as it feels, is not surveillance. It is homecoming.